Hey folks, good to see you on this Monday. First day of Holy Week, and well, some people count Palm Sunday, I guess, as the first day of Holy Week, but first weekday of Holy Week, and I'm glad we can be together. Tonight I just want to reflect some on what it means to be entering into Holy Week right now. A lot of pastor friends, or several pastor friends have posted this meme that I've referred to it before. It says, "This is the lentiest Lent I've ever lented." It's true. It's been a real wilderness journey and cause for a lot of reflection. I read a pastor's post that said, when we put ashes on your foreheads back on Ash Wednesday, none of us could have ever imagined that this is where Lent would lead us. And it's true. And now here we are at Holy Week. And I don't know, I'm wondering, can this be the holiest Holy Week we've ever holied? I don't know, maybe that's asking too much. But there is a holiness in the solitude for sure. And actually I think there's a holiness in the struggle that our world is going through. It's a time where we call out to God and maybe feel even closer to God. But tonight, as I'm thinking about this the first Holy Week that nobody knew was a Holy Week as it was happening, I'm thinking about what happened in those days between when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and we had a wonderful Palm Sunday worship yesterday. But what happened between that day and where we pick up again on Maundy Thursday with the Last Supper, and Good Friday with the crucifixion, and Holy Saturday with that in-between time, and then of course next Sunday, Easter Sunday, where we celebrate resurrection and the triumph of life over death and love over hate. What happened in those first 3 days of that week? We get glimpses of it for sure in the Bible. We, at least the Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us that right immediately after the triumphant entry into Jerusalem, some pretty rough stuff happened. Jesus didn't act like someone who had just been greeted with accolades and shouts of Hosanna. He was agitated. He was frustrated. He was worried and grieving for where he saw the people going. This is when he went into the temple and turned over the tables. This is when he wept over Jerusalem. This is when Jesus struggled with what it all means and what the people he came to serve were doing. And I'm just guessing he struggled with, has it even been worth it? Entering into the holy city and seeing so much corruption and greed. So many people just looking out for themselves. So I'm reflecting tonight on what does that mean for us? How do we enter into this Holy Week, and how do we surrender and let go of and look past those things that keep us from God, those things that are keeping us focused on worldly possessions and focused on ourselves and focused on keeping other people out and all those kinds of things. And I'm just thinking about the ways we still get it wrong, and how Jesus might be lamenting, I don't know, maybe lamenting pastors who insist that they still worship and gather and have big groups of people in their churches in spite of the virus and the threat that brings to other people. Maybe Jesus is grieving that we still think somehow borders can keep a virus out, and that we can keep other people, that by keeping other people out, we protect ourselves. Maybe Jesus is grieving that we have attached a nationality to the virus, and that there's been discrimination and hate against people just because they're from the country that we've decided brought this virus to the world. And I think there's a lot that Jesus is grieving over, and calling us to grieve over, and calling us to move past, calling us to find what it means to be followers of the one that will rise from the grave. So before we get to Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday and Easter, I'm going to be reflecting tonight and also on Wednesday just on these in-between days of processing and looking some hard things in the face perhaps, but also looking past those things towards a love that conquers death, a love that conquers hate, a love that we just still even don't understand 2,000 years later, that we still don't quite know what it means. So that's your preaching for the night, but for the rest of this time I'm going to play some music that for me it takes me from the triumphant entry yesterday into the wondering of today. Not sure what's next, but knowing that we're with God and God is with us, and that we're continuing to follow this one who rode into Jerusalem, turned over some tables, cried some tears, but then went to a meal that brings us all together, went through a gruesome death and went past that to everlasting life. So that's the spoiler alert. Tonight it's from the triumphant entry into a time of waiting and wondering. So I'm going to play a very favorite Palm Sunday song of mine from the Gospel according to Andrew Lloyd Webber, and move past that a little bit and to a time that leads us into the week. enter into this Holy Week, my prayer for you and for me, for us, is that it really can be the holiest Holy Week I've ever holied. We understand that means following Jesus into some tough places. And the great thing about this story is it reminds us that we can follow Jesus and we can falter along the way, because every single one of the people following Jesus did. And guess what? He loved them just the same. In fact, somehow seems like maybe he loved them even more. So my friends, Holy Week blessings as we begin this journey together. I'll be back Wednesday at 5, and then don't forget we have services Monday, Thursday at 7 that you'll be able to see online. Good Friday at 7 that you'll be able to see online, and then we will be celebrating the resurrection on Easter Sunday. So till Wednesday, stay safe, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you then.